Oh hi, another video from Geospatial-Next. Those that haven't joined the channel before, we have two focus areas. The first one is how we widen adoption of the technology. The second area is around the crypto blockchain space. This one is focused on crossing the chasm, as I often say, or widening adoption. And the title of this particular talk is Geospatial in need of an injection of business innovation? So let's dig in. So let's begin by digging a little bit into that word innovation. It's a very overused word, but let's just be concise about what I always read innovation as. I think of it as thinking about and approaching a challenge differently. It's that thinking out of the box, but it isn't just throwing ideas around. That leads us into this notion of bounded ideation, and I will cover that in a few moments. But all innovation really needs to be customer driven, and it needs to be validated by customers. So it's just not a bunch of notions that come out of one's head. It actually has to be driven by customers and customer problems. So the challenge that we face in geospatial industry today is widening the adoption of geospatial. And anyone that saw my last Crossing the Chasm talk will have seen me talk a little bit more about that. So what is today's reality? And again, a little bit of repetition from the last video I did. Geospatial and GIS are department focused. They're very much centered around technology and maps. And we talk about widening adoption, but that means C-suite conversations and entry into new verticals. But to get there, we continue to beat the same drum. So what do I mean by beating the same drum? Really what I'm saying there is the focus is always on GIS managers. Invariably it's on GIS managers. There's many conversations around leadership and how GIS managers can be better leaders and how they should focus attention on that whole world of leadership. There's also a bigger push I've noticed of late around geospatial strategy. I'm okay with strategy. My contention is around really these notions of building a geospatial strategy. And again, we can cover that a bit more. So these approaches have not necessarily been wrong, but I've seen this kind of same approach, if you like, for the last 10 years. And what I've really been seeing is it's been very mixed in success-wise. So this is where innovation comes in. So let's really talk about the business of innovation. Now, when one talks about innovation, people often think immediately technology, and too often it's attached to technology. But the technology is easy, and some people are going to throw things at me by saying that, but truly, we have got a world where the technology's gotten easier, and we've got ever more smart people who are building and creating new technology. I've spoken to many startups that want to always start on the technology side because, again, they've said to me, we find that a lot easier. Business is really hard. Business is really, really hard. There are so many parts to being successful in business. So let me read this to you. Business innovation is about crossing the chasm or engaging with a new set of users and driving adoption among these users of a new solution. So some people have questioned whether crossing the chasm is the right term here. My strong belief is it actually is, because we have a very established technology in particular sectors. Where we're trying to get that technology to is out of the niche that we've built and into the wider organization, the enterprise. So having business folks, the C-level folk use it, and also into new sectors. And there's a whole world, particularly in the commercial and private world, that do not use geospatial or GIS technology. So when I say crossing the chasm, that's what I'm talking about. So how do we get there? It's my thought that within a team, that might be a GIS team within an organization or a consulting company, dedicated individual or a team focused on innovation needs to be in place. It can't be a side thought, it's got to be a central thought. And the folks in that group have to be very carefully picked. I also believe that geospatial shouldn't be treated as a standalone technology. We've, for the longest time, and there's some commercial reasons for this, positioned geospatial and GIS technology as this standalone. It's this solution you have to buy that's sort of separate to the rest of the organization. In fact, I've seen some folks talking about the fact that you buy a GIS and then you link everything else into it. So this GIS is at the core of everything. I don't think that's the right approach. I mentioned bounded ideation, and here I'm saying apply bounded ideation. What I'm really saying there is, and this is that kind of the Lego model. Lego had 3 phases. I've mentioned this in other talks. Their first phase, which was super successful, where they launched. When the digital revolution happened in the 90s, they lost their way a little bit, and they were very threatened by the fact that kids were moving on to computer games. So they changed their business model and they threw lots of ideas out there. They said to their staff, any idea is a good idea. And they chased after all these ideas. Few were successful. In fact, that approach nearly bankrupted the company. They went back in their third phase, where they are now, and they encouraged ideas, but they bound it. They said, this is our audience. These are the constraints, if you like. These are the guardrails that you need to have those ideas within. And most importantly, they tested those ideas out continuously on the solutions to those problems with the kids who are the target audience for Lego. So I think the same application needs to be done in organizations in the way I'm talking here. I talk about workflows. When I think about GIS, I think of geospatial, I think about this standalone, it's a map. What can we do with maps? When I think about business intelligence, Tableau, for example, that's a visualization tool targeted at a business community. It's for viewing data in a more understandable way. So maps are part of that world. It's not meant to be a deep analytical tool. It's meant to be this way to visualize data. There's been sort of a competition between GIS and BI over the last few years, particularly in the business world. I don't think, my belief is that we have to understand the existing business flows that are in place, which is slightly different. Let me expand on that. So we got to look for questions within these workflows which geospatial can help answer. So what I'm saying is, and again, this is part of my world, in areas like SAP, there are workflows in there which are business workflows. How can we bring geospatial into that world, embed maps, enable answers to questions that take maybe 5 steps and make them 1 step? It's that kind of approach is can we actually just embed and integrate geospatial into those existing workflows? This is a notion of being invisible, that geospatial just becomes invisible. It's kind of this given, it's the piece of the puzzle that's there and we missed it, and oh my gosh, how do we ever live without this? It's that kind of approach that I'm thinking about. So I'm going to finish with a quick use case. I've spoken at length about Geospatial 2.0, and now I've morphed that into sort of Geospatial-Next. A lot of that has been around this inflection point our industry's in. In fact, the world of technology is in, where we've now got mini sensors. We can collect all sorts of different data types. IoT is a huge example, you know, the space economy. But the critical thing I think that brings value to geospatial, one of them is real-time data. So instead of viewing data that's a day old, a week old, we can actually present data to folks and analyze data that's real-time or near real-time. Situational awareness is a really good example of that. What's going on in my organization right now? So as an example, it's really, I mean, think of an event. We've got lots of those: fires, wildfires, hurricanes, flooding. What is the impact of an event on people and assets, and how can we react to that really quickly? The GIS is an important part of that, because we're talking about things that happen somewhere. So this is a location-based question. GIS is the where part of that conversation. So where is the asset? Where is the person? What's around that person or asset? And what's connected to? What's the relationships there? But that on its own isn't enough. What you need to do actually is then to ask the what question and to take action. And that's where bringing other systems in, like SAP business systems, are important. So again, a big part of my Lacana world is really kind of telling that story and thinking through those workflows, which are not only about the where on their own and not only about the what on their own, but bringing these together and that synergy between those, which brings real value to folks. And I think that we learn from the consumer world. I mean, business is much slower than the consumer world, so we learn from that. And what's been successful in the consumer world, think of Uber. It's a frictionless, easy application. Now, there's a lot going on under the hood, but to the user, it's very simple. In the world that I inhabit within Locana, I really think a lot about what a single interface looks like. So one access point, for example, to a GIS and SAP. I mean, an EAM system, enterprise asset management system, is a good example where you have a work order and a map, and I've mentioned that before. But these are the kind of use cases that are in my mind as we walk through this, and this is the kind of stuff we have to work with customers to understand their workflows, and then make, in my belief, make geospatial invisible. It's just embedded within those workflows. So that's today's talk. Always welcome your feedback. And I'll look forward to doing the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for joining us on the Geospatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.